Oh, we're on live. Okay, I'll make you a host now.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Okay, and then if you could make me your co-host too. Thank you, Bob.
Sure. There you go.
Thanks.
I'll start recording too. Only a minute before class start. There we go. Now we should be seeing some people showing up here. Hi, Mary Ellen. Good to see you again.
Hi.
Hi, we're just waiting for people to start joining up our meeting. For those of you that are watching on live stream, we give people a minute or two to join before we get started. So be patient. We'll be with you in with just a minute. Some of our regular Get Set Up learners are joining us. I recognize some faces. We have Kim from Get Set Up. She is a teaching assistant. She's going to be on the meeting as well. She'll help out with any technical issues that we might have or help any questions that we can help out with during the meeting as well. So this is a class on live or retire abroad with a focus on healthcare and culture. It's part of a four-class series we do, and we mix them up a little bit. One's on living or retiring abroad. Is it right for you? Another one is on finances and costs. And another one is on housing and where you might want to consider living, what's available to you from different options. So I see we have people joining us coming on board. So we'll give people just another minute and give them a chance to get into the meeting, okay? But while we're waiting, I'm just curious if anybody has any questions about uh, Get Set Up or live or retire abroad or anything that we can help out with before we get started, okay? All right. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen and share some slides here with you, and we'll take a look at the agenda and what we've got going on today and different things that we might want to be looking at. I'm your guide, Bob Cohen. I was born in the Midwest in Chicago and went out to school in California and stayed in the tech industry my whole life. I do a lot of the technology classes for Get Set Up. I do classes on Windows and PowerPoint and Zoom and web browsing and networks and other things like that. So, but about 8 years ago, my wife passed away, and after about a year of adjusting to things, I decided to take a look at where I could live. I decided that there were options I could use for living abroad and trying things out and looking around different places. So I decided to do that and take a look, and ended up living in Barcelona for a little while, and ended up also visiting Thailand to see if I wanted to live there, and also Colombia and Costa Rica and a couple of other places. I'd read an article in a book that said that, or on a web page said, here's 10 places in the world you can live comfortably on $1,500 a month. And so I thought, let's go check them out. And a couple of friends came with me. So we visited a few places as more of a place to live than anything else. So
Did any of your friends end up moving there to any of those places?
well, none of my friends ended up moving long term because COVID kind of put a little block in that. We were getting ready to go to Cambodia. I've lived in Barcelona, but I also have a son that has been in Europe for about 8 years, living full time in Europe, and so he was kind of an inspiration for me to kind of check this out as well. and he runs a business out of Malta, but he lives and works in Barcelona. So if you're familiar with Get Set Up, you know we're a learning community. Ideally, we can see you and your cameras are on, and that gives us an opportunity to people share experiences. Some people have lived abroad before. If you're joining by live stream, we encourage you to join us for a free account at getsetup.io and register for a class. I've taken classes. There's lots of classes on everything from travel and technology and fitness and eating and dining. And I was talking to one of our Australian guides, and she was showing me some of the classes she does in Australia about animals and in Australia. Did you see that, Mary Ellen? Yeah, kind of interesting. I learned a little bit about what a bandicoot is the other day. So we're not paid to promote any specific products, websites, or organizations, but we do mention them as part of our training. Okay, so
He's talking about living abroad. He's talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
overseas medical insurance
Oh,
and
yeah.
different things. I think it'd be useful.
Yeah.
put you. So Kim, could you just check and make sure we mute people? Some microphones pick up a lot of conversation and noise sometimes. So ideally, we want to make sure that if you have a question, you unmute yourself. But if you do have a question and you're not talking, the best thing to do is to mute your microphone so that we don't pick up any noise in the background, because that can interfere. Unfortunately, Zoom makes everyone the active speaker. Okay, so but if you have a question, feel free to unmute. You also have a tool in your Zoom window. If you're on a desktop or a laptop, at the bottom of your Zoom window is a little icon called reactions. And you can try it out now. You can practice with it. If you click on reactions, it actually lets you raise your hand. So I can see your virtual hand up in your Zoom window, or you can give me a thumbs up or applaud or send a heart, and a few other things there too. But the raising hand feature is really a great feature because it lets me know you have a question and I can call on you, so that we can get questions or asked and taken care of as well. Okay, so today we're going to cover an agenda that's a little more focused on medical aspects of living abroad, but we can cover some other things too. We're going to talk about medical insurance, the quality of care that you would receive abroad, what to deal with and what to expect when you have emergencies, what exists or doesn't exist in terms of long-term care, and then some tips on adapting to a new culture. Okay, so there's a class we do on live or work abroad, is it right for you, where we cover a lot of general topics, but this is a little more focused on medical care and what you do, because that's one of the biggest questions that comes up for people is what happens if I get sick and I'm not in my home country. So let's take a look at some of the issues that we run into on these. And I'm going to show you some websites. So some of you may be familiar with a type of medical insurance called Medicare. Okay, I'm on Medicare, and it is provided by the United States government for people over the age of 65. And it's a great plan. It provides a lot of medical coverage for you. There is medical coverage through private insurance. Okay, you might have a private insurance policy through a company retirement plan, or you pay for yourself. And so there's private insurers as well. And sometimes people with Medicare get a supplemental policy or a Medigap policy that adds a private insurer and Medicare together as a combination. And then there's something called international insurance, which is insurance for you when you are residing or traveling in another country. Okay, so there's medical insurance that covers costs and other issues you deal with when you're dealing with Medicare, with medical coverage. Medicare has some peculiarities when it comes to traveling abroad. It doesn't work outside of the United States. Medicare stops when you leave the United States. And so there's absolutely no coverage that it provides if you're in Mexico or Canada or Spain or anywhere. It just doesn't exist. Now, there are some supplemental plans that you can use with Medicare. One is called Medicare Advantage, and the other is called Medigap. Medicare Advantage assigns your Medicare coverage to a private insurer, like say Kaiser or Blue Shield or Blue Cross or Aetna or whatever, and they take over your Medicare benefit and they provide the healthcare insurance. Many of them provide HMOs, but they often provide supplemental coverage when you are traveling abroad. So the first thing you should do for getting ready to travel abroad, no matter what, whether it's vacation or living abroad, is to check your insurance coverage for medical insurance. Call the 800 number, visit the website, find out how long the coverage is effective when you travel outside the US, what it covers, how do you get services, and other things. It's a little bit of preparation. It's much easier to do in the US when you have all US telephone numbers and access to your home and everything like that. And some of these policies may provide you with some coverage when you go abroad. Okay, some of them may cover you for up to 30 days. Some of you may cover you for 90 days. Some of them may cover you for 2 weeks. Some of them may not cover you at all. They're all different. And so you really just have to call and check. You can get supplemental international insurance that supplements your existing US policy, including Medicare. So that if Medicare is your primary coverage in the United States, or well, whoever is, there's companies out there like GeoBlue and others that give you the ability to add on supplemental coverage for when you travel abroad. And they generally have either 2 or 3 types of plans. One is a plan that is for travelers. One is a plan for longer term travelers, and one is a plan for what are called expats, expatriates, people that go live abroad and make that their full-time residence. I'm going to move something around on my screen a little bit here so I can see things better. And I'm going to share my web browser with my slides at the same time. We're going to see how that works. Usually works pretty good, but you never know with technology. Okay, so now you should see the slide on the left and websites on the right. This is GeoBlue's website, and you're going to get links to all of these in the after class email, because I prepared, I've done all this research. GeoBlue is a supplemental policy that has travel, medical, and international health insurance. So they have 3 plan approaches. Let me draw a little circle around this so you can see it better. Okay, find your plan for a single trip. If you're just going on a trip to, say, Europe for 2 weeks, or you're going on multiple trips, maybe you're going to be traveling around a lot of places. That's what I did when I was exploring places to live abroad, is I took many trips, during the year. or long-term, which is when you're really going to be staying somewhere for a lengthy period of time, usually more than 90 days in one location. So GeoBlue is got plans, and they're they all will tell you why they're different or better, but they all pretty much do similar things. They provide 24/7. I'm going to make this bigger here if I can. There we go. They provide 24/7 access to help. They have a listing and a directory of doctors and hospitals that they have vetted and inspected and checked out. They give you the ability to have cashless appointments so that you don't have to pay with a credit card. They do give you the ability to schedule appointments. They have international translation services. They have paperless claims and destination health intelligence. They'll give you a report on health conditions wherever you're traveling to. So as an individual, you can apply for a plan with GeoBlue. You don't have to be a company or an organization or anything. And when I applied about 4 years ago for GeoBlue to get their multiple trip plan, which is when I was exploring countries, it cost me about $300 a year and to supplement my existing Medicare coverage. So that was $300 a year, and I had GeoBlue. I had an ID card. It was recognized internationally. It was accepted by a doctor. They provided, reimbursement if I had to pay out of pocket, but I didn't have to pay out of pocket. And they had toll-free numbers and numbers I could reach people anywhere. So it was great for doing that. You don't have to be a Blue Cross or Blue Shield policyholder in order to subscribe to GeoBlue. Any questions about them? Margaret asked me, did I have regular Medicare or a managed? I had Medicare with a Medigap add-on that I used because the Medigap took care of the gaps in Medicare that were that didn't handle things. So I didn't have the Medicare Advantage, which is a managed Medicare. Typically, people think about where they take over the manager. I had Medigap, but GeoBlue is available even if you just have plain Medicare, without anything else. So they will provide supplemental insurance for you. Okay, let's take a look at some other health providers. Private insurance. Okay, you might have private insurance already in the United States. You might have travel insurance that you can get for as part of your private insurance policy. And if you have private insurance, that's where you really have to call their 800 number and get the details on what they cover, because they might have limits on the number of days. They might have a maximum benefit limit when you're outside of the US. They may or may not have an international helpline. Okay, that's really valuable. So supplemental coverage is usually available if you have a longer stay, sometimes with the company, your private insurer, sometimes with other people. Medigap does cover some things overseas, but only when you're on vacations, which are typically shorter stays. It had a limit of time outside, but I called my insurer. I had Blue Cross, or rather Blue Shield was my Medigap policy. And I called the 800 number and I said, when I travel on vacation outside of the US, what's my coverage? And they gave me all the information, the phone number to call if I needed help, information on where I can get help whenever I'm in what countries I was traveling to, and other things like that. So I just was doing longer trips, and so I decided to get the supplemental coverage available through GeoBlue that gave me access and evacuation services too. Oh, Okay, Margaret, you bought Go Blue. Okay, great. So these are things, and it's always important to check your insurance policy and call them and ask them what their limits are on the number of days, if they have a maximum benefit, if they have international services that they provide you with. Some do, but some don't. So they're all different plans. Well, thanks, Margaret, for posting that in chat. That's great. Yeah, I make typos in chat all the time too. I know what you're talking about. International insurance. Okay. There are companies like Cigna and Aetna and Alliance that provide international health coverage if you are residing in a country outside of your local country. And this has been done by businesses all the time. We have an international global economy. And so when you go through international activities and you're doing different things in different areas, businesses have to provide coverage overseas. And so Cigna Global, Aetna, and Alliance are probably three of the largest international healthcare providers. Nita, I'm not I think you're talking about Canadian TRICARE champs. Is that right? If I'm not mistaken. I'm not a Canadian citizen, and so unfortunately, I'm not very familiar with what they do outside of Canada when you travel. Oh, U.S. military. Okay. U.S. military, I honestly don't know a lot about that. And that's one of the things where you've got to call your plan to find out what they do and find out if what military coverage does. I know that for the VA, for example, the only country outside of the United States where you can get coverage as part of the VA is with in the Philippines. There happens to be a VA hospital in the Philippines. But other than that, it's just United States and territories. So your military coverage may or may not help you. It may help you on vacation, but it may or may not help you if you have an extended stay somewhere, like on a leave or something like that. So that's a little bit more that I'm familiar with. I apologize for that. I know some veterans that have coverage, and what they do is get they use VA in the United States, but they get an international supplement policy for living abroad when they're abroad, depending on how much time it is. So Cigna will give you individual quotes, and the services are very similar. 24/7 access to multilingual, 1.65 million hospitals and healthcare professionals, medical support in 200 countries, and they'll get you a quote. It's a direct quote from them, and you're going to get links to this in the website. So for individuals, for employers, but you're probably going to be looking at individuals. Now, I don't know whether Cigna would consider a military a government official or not. That might be something to check out, Nita. I'm not positive on that. They have a health blog and about information. So you can apply directly and you'll get an email quote and you'll get information on what it costs. So when you're looking at staying more than your domestic coverage provides coverage for, then you would go to one of these policies. Another one, Aetna, provides international coverage. So Aetna gives you the available info, helps for individuals, for families, pre-trip guidance, 24/7 assistance, and you can get a quote online within a matter of hours. And another very popular one is someone called Alliance Care. So they give you help for personal, international coverage. You can call them online quote for students, professionals, people planning a family or already established families. And they have a lot of these things, family friendly app, digital solutions, wellness, and they give you access to information on what kinds of plans, benefits are available. So this was interesting. So, getting a hospital room, getting hospital care is one thing, but getting a private or semi-private room is going to change your premium. You can see medical evacuation. A lot of people don't think about medical evacuation, but I worked for a company that did medical evacuation before COVID. They still do it now, but we provided medical coverage for companies all over the world, and it costs anywhere from like $35,000 to $50,000 to evacuate someone from a country and bring them back to the United States. It's expensive. It's expensive. And so this medical evacuation program that's available from these policies, and GeoBlue, Cigna, Aetna, they all usually do that. They all usually have information on that. And they have outpatient services. You can even get dental plans. You can get a repatriation. So say you're overseas and you want to come back to the US for a month or two. That's called repatriation, so that when you're in the US, you can still use your international healthcare coverage while you're in the United States. So you don't have to have a US policy necessarily. So the insurance industry is really, really used to dealing with people that live and work abroad overseas because they have supported businesses, governments, and nonprofits for decades on doing this. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can see you better on video here and pause for some questions. Norma, does my Advantage plan still remain in effect if you have this other coverage? Yes, it does. If you have an Advantage plan, you keep paying your premiums, as long as you keep paying your premiums, the plan's in effect. So you can have two plans. I met some people in Rio de Janeiro when I was considering living there, and there was a good contingent of Americans, and some of them said, I don't have health insurance for Brazil. Whenever I'll go and see a doctor, I'll pay cash, but when I need something more, I'll just take an airplane and fly up to Miami. It's about 3 hours flying time away. Not what I would do, but some people feel very, very comfortable doing that. They're very happy doing that. But I would rather have insurance, overseas of some sort, whether it's for travel. Because my approach towards moving abroad when I first started doing is I traveled to places and stayed there for like a week or two at a time. And then I narrowed down the number of places I wanted to go see, and I went and stayed there for about 3 weeks to a month to get to know local neighborhoods. And then I moved there. I moved to Colombia, and I moved to Barcelona in Spain and lived there for a while. But when you're doing that exploration, sometimes the travel coverage you have from your existing health plan might be enough, but you might want to, look at, but just make sure you know exactly what they're going to do, because some of them don't do any evacuation. If you get sick in, Portugal, you're stuck in Portugal. They may cover your hospitalization or other things, but they might have a limit on what they provide. But they do know that people go on vacation, and so they do provide typically vacation coverage for things that might happen during that period of time, but not necessarily for longer terms. That's where it gets tricky. Okay. Who's ever gotten healthcare coverage while they've been overseas? Anybody? Okay. It's very different. It's very different. First of all, things like pharmacies play a very different role when you're outside of the US. Okay. And so you can start to take advantage of some things that you might not have thought about before. So one of the things you can look at, just to wrap up international insurance, keep in mind that if you're in a more remote area, there's a firm that I worked with as a partner, as kind of they were affiliated with us, called Global Rescue. They had people that would go and rescue people off mountain climbing expeditions. So I mean, there are services out there if you're willing to pay for it. You know, it's just a matter of what's available. But keep in mind also that if you're in a city of any kind of population, you've probably got a lot of healthcare options available. Keep in mind, COVID has changed a lot of what's available in different parts of the world, as we're seeing with Latin America and India and other countries. We had our bouts, and fortunately, we're getting a little better. But other countries have different demands on their healthcare system because of COVID. So that's something. And the U.S. Department of State provides a great website that gives you information on the risks of traveling to certain countries, including healthcare. But if you keep up to date in the news, you're probably getting a picture of what's going on. All right. Another option for healthcare is something called cash. We don't usually think of it in the United States because we have a healthcare system where disclosure of prices is not really there yet. I mean, you can get a price on almost anything except what it's going to cost you to get something taken care of by a doctor or a hospital, right? And so cash is very different internationally. You can ask people what prices are. And so you can get information on that. Pharmacists offer medical advice. In many cases around the world, pharmacies are kind of a first, line of healthcare for other people. There's a lot of lower cost medicines. It's rare that you need prescriptions for most medications. Obviously, regulated, narcotics and other types of drugs, certain types of drugs require prescriptions, but antibiotics, other things that are out there just don't require prescriptions, and a pharmacist can dispense them, and the prices are almost always lower. And if you talk to a doctor or about, a medical exam, $10, $20 sometimes, procedures like CAT scans and diagnostic tests and other things can be much lower cost than what you might expect in the US. There was a time when I think Amazon and Warren Buffett and another company were looking at trying to put together some kind of healthcare consortium, and they were actively looking at offering employees discounts or benefits if they were willing to travel outside of the United States for high cost medical procedures. Medical tourism, it's not very active right now because of COVID, but medical tourism is a big industry. When I was in Costa Rica and I was living there, I took a bus tour out to the countryside, and we picked up some people at the hotel. And out of the 8 of us on the tour, 6 people were there because they had come down to Costa Rica for some dental work, because they found that it was, much less expensive than what it would cost to get done in the United States. They vetted their dentists, and even in the customs area, when you go into Costa Rica and go through customs, there are ads on display panels for people, to advertising dental care and other procedures and things like that. So Silverenia asks a question: approximately how much are the premiums? It varies. I mean, I got a quote for my monthly premium when I was in my late 60s, fairly recently. It was going to cost me about $380 a month for coverage in Spain. Okay, so if I wanted medical insurance for while I was living in Spain, and it did cover me on short, trips anywhere I traveled on vacation. So if I wanted to go to France or Italy or anything like that, it also covered me if I came back to the U.S. So I could drop, I could cut down on some of my U.S. policies coverage, but I kept it in place anyway. So everybody's, keep in mind that you got to ask questions about pre-existing conditions and other things like that. So keep that in mind. But the medical industry, as you probably have seen through COVID, like there's, pharmaceutical companies, they're global companies. They make prescription medication all over the world. But in most other countries outside of the United States, it's less expensive and medical care is oftentimes based on the local earning power. So if you went to Germany or say Denmark, you'd probably find similar medical costs to the United States. But if you were in, say, Colombia or Brazil or Spain or Portugal, where the cost of living is lower, you'd find lower costs for your medical care as well, even for cash and out of pocket. Okay, so healthcare quality, all right, is it any good? It depends, okay, like anything else. The accreditation organization for international healthcare is called the Joint Commission International. And there's another organization called the International Society of Travel Medicine. There are a lot of people that travel internationally for business, for charitable organizations, for government work, and they need to get health care. And so the quality rates facilities, language, and oftentimes there's a US educated staff. The US medical school organizations have a booming business, not so right now, but they've always had a very large student population of non-US citizens that come to the United States to study medicine. And then they travel overseas, back home to practice, but they want to get a US education. They might not worry about getting their residency in the US or their MD, their license to practice in the US, but they've gone through medical school in the United States. And so you can find a US educated medical professionals almost anywhere in the world, any major metropolitan area. These are some pictures that I took from various facilities I visited. The one in the upper left is a dental office that I visited in Costa Rica. This one is a hospital in Thailand. And actually in Bangkok, there are about 25 or 30 hospitals of this size. This is one in Colombia. This is one in Mexico. They do have modern facilities and up-to-date care. In fact, the World Health Organization ranks the US as 37th in terms of overall health care. If you're in a major metropolitan area, you do have hospitals and physicians and staffing. But if you're in a more rural area in the United States or a smaller town, a lot of hospitals are really small and understaffed and don't have the supplies. So we have quite a wide range of healthcare quality depending on where you live in the United States. And that's true of the world as well. But keep in mind that metropolitan areas typically do have really high quality care all over the place and great facilities. Any questions about healthcare before we move on a little bit to culture? Okay, so healthcare is an important issue. Now, I don't show it in this class normally, but I'm going to share it with you right now. One of the websites that I look at often, and it's a good place to start, is one called International Living. If this is a new idea for you, the idea of living abroad, internationalliving.com, I'll put them in chat here and post a link in chat for you that might want it. They're a good starting place. And I subscribed to them for about 2 years when I started looking for places to go around. And I visited about 15 countries and you going around to different places in the country. Keep in mind that international living is there to promote the idea of living abroad for Americans. And so they do have some partnerships with people that sell real estate. And so keep that in mind as well. But they do have a great set of reports by country. So some of the top countries for living abroad are ones that are close to the US, like Costa Rica, Mexico, Belize, Ecuador, Panama. Some are out in Europe, like Portugal, France, and Spain. But they do have country reports on a lot of countries. They will give you advice on what their expatriates think. They give you a free report, but you will get emailed asking you to subscribe. They talk about places to live in the dream, beach, and then they have reports on countries: Ecuador, Costa Rica, Panama, Belize, Mexico, Thailand, France, Colombia. They're popular countries for expats because they have good health care, they're safe. There's an expat community that lives there already. They're welcoming to foreigners that want to move there and live there. And so they are popular countries because of that. Some countries are wonderful to visit, but they really don't want you living there if you're not a local national. You can visit, for as long as for often, but they don't really care about having you come and live there. And others are different. Others really encourage it because it helps their economy. So international living gives you a lot of reports. Costa Rica was their #1 destination this year. And it's become a little more affordable. You'll get these ads that'll pop up, but they have a great climate. And a couple can live on about $2,000 a month very comfortably, all of their costs. And one thing about Costa Rica that I didn't realize until I started investigating it, but the Costa Rica does not have a standing military of their own. Costa Rica actually pays the United States to have the US Marines defend them in case of an invasion or military action. So Costa Rica's got a lot of connections with the United States that make it friendly. They're friendly, they're easy to get around, but about 90% of the population of Costa Rica lives in San Jose. So it's the rural countryside is beautiful, it's safe. A lot of people go hiking and packing and visiting from all over the world. But it's and it's really easy to move to if you're interested. Now, international living will make every country sound really appealing. People have wonderful lives. And I see some of you laughing, but it is truly a rose-colored glasses type of website where everything is wonderful. There are some downsides to living abroad, and sometimes you have to be the kind of person that's willing to start a new social network and get things going. You can find all the things you really need almost everywhere in the world, but finding new friends is sometimes a little harder. But one good thing about going to a country where there's expatriates living is that it does make it easier for you to make friends. People are looking to make friends. So having an expat community, and a good way to find them is on Facebook groups. Facebook has groups So if you look for expats Costa Rica, expats Colombia, expats Spain, you'll find a lot of groups that are out there, and these groups share information. They organize field trips, other things like that that are helpful for you to get to know. But I would go to visit a country and stay at a hotel my first trip, and that way I had the front desk that was able to help me out. But I'd start to visit real estate offices. I'd start to visit grocery stores. I'd start to go visit laundries. I wanted to get an idea of what was going to be like. And I'd ask, people what, where expats live, what, kind of communities are worth visiting. And so I'd start to take, taxi rides or Uber rides and walk around those communities and explore them. And so those are things that I did over, one or two trips. The other thing I did was I would sign up for language schools in the local country. First of all, you're going to learn a lot about the culture. Language and culture are really tied together. And so I would learn with a great deal of difficulty, a foreign language, but the instructors really became a trusted resource. I keep in touch with a couple of them still after years of living, of moving back to the US. But you can say, hey, if I wanted to get a visa, do you know an attorney that would be good that could help me out with that? If I was looking for neighborhoods to live in, if I wanted to move here. So language schools are wonderful resources. I really encourage. Cooking schools are also good resources, and that you can. I ran across a Canadian citizen that was traveling in Thailand, and we shared a taxi into towards our hotel area, and she was taking a 3-week class in Thai cooking. That was, and so these things are out there. So but language schools to me were one of the best resources for a local area. Keep in mind, the holiday schedule is the local holiday schedule, not the United States schedule, right? So if you're wondering what happened to Thanksgiving, it probably doesn't happen there, okay? So you might find some expats that get together and celebrate those things. There's always a restaurant that seems to cater to expats in most major metropolitan areas overseas. Religion. If you're looking for a place to practice whatever religious preferences you have, there may be available, they may not. When my son went to Switzerland to study abroad for the first time, he got really upset. And I said, "Why? What is bothering you?" He said, "Well, Dad, I have to pay an ecclesiastical tax because every foreigner that comes into Switzerland has to pay a tax to the church." So state religion does exist in other parts of the world. It doesn't exist in the United States, but there are certain things that are more dominant in terms of religious practices. A lot of holidays in Thailand, huh, Kim? Because of culture and beliefs. And I'm going to show you a book. The other schedules, some people work, different schedules are different. How, in Spain, my son's always complaining because he's gotten used to it over the years, but it's still very frustrating. Somebody says they're going to be at this place at 3 o'clock to repair something, and they don't show, they don't call, so expect things to move at a little different place, expect differences. Now, one of the things that I found that really helped me a lot, and my late wife was really a good resource for this. She really had a good perception of foreign culture. But this is a book that I found a couple of years ago. It's called Behave Yourself. What it is, let's see if I can find the description from the inside flap. Let me make this larger. Okay. It's a book that basically helps you understand international customs. People don't shake hands everywhere in the world. So that's something that might be comfortable, and you might reach out to shake somebody's hand and they may step away. Some people don't touch in public. Some countries, when they say dinner is at 7 o'clock, they mean 7 o'clock. Other countries, when dinner, opens up at 7, it might be 7:30, quarter to 8, whatever, right? So this is a great guide for how to do a lot of things in most countries. It's actually one of the best ones I found. So things like how to eat, when to be on time, who will welcome you, getting to know you, and who you find familiarity uncomfortable, where gestures might mean yes or no, and where everyday activities can land you in jail. There are some countries in the world where chewing gum is prohibited. And so you might get arrested for doing those things. And so it's a helpful resource to make sure that you have a better understanding. And that's why the language, taking language from people in a language school really helps you learn about the culture really fast. I was always a big fan of that. But it's not for everybody, right? But it's something that I recommend. Okay, so there are tools like Duolingo and Babbel, and I think we have a new position we've created on travel. There's going to be, now we have somebody that kind of takes the lead. It gets set up on organizing travel technology classes, and somebody that's taking the lead in organizing fitness and wellness classes. And now we have somebody that's taking the lead on organizing travel classes. So we're going to, fill in some gaps and areas that we might not have had. English is still very common in tourist and expat areas. But if you really just don't want to worry about the language, Belize is English is the national language. They're a former British colony. So you can use that in Belize and not worry about what you're having to worry about another language. Google Translate, great tool, great tool. I carried on a conversation in Bangkok with two people from Japan that didn't speak any English by using Google Translate. It was a slow conversation, but it made progress. We made progress. We were able to communicate in a rudimentary level. They didn't speak any Thai. They didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any Japanese, but we had a great conversation. We became friends on Instagram, and I still, keep in touch with them. If you learn a little bit of the language, you get a wider choice for shopping, for cultural aspects. You can enjoy a local performance, a dance, a public event. Discounts, things are available. Even if you just have a limited amount of language capability, will help you out a lot. So it makes a big difference. The language and culture really taught me that they're really tied together. So before I do a summary and wrap up, anybody have any questions? You ready to go abroad, and start to make that planning trip? I'm getting ready to go back to Spain, but I have a son that lives in Barcelona, and he told me that the EU will probably have paperwork processes set up by July for vaccinated Americans to be able to travel to Spain. And so I'm planning on August and going there and visiting him. Haven't seen him for about a year and a half now. So where are people thinking of going? Anybody have any thoughts on where they'd like to travel to? But I think we're going to start seeing a lot of travel once it gets a little easier to travel too.
Well, I have one son and his family in Vienna, and I started exploring Eastern European countries, and but this Corona stuff started, so I want to go back. I like the Romania, Bulgaria, Slovenia, that area I just don't know.
Slovenia is an interesting country. Slovenia actually has a lot of Western nationals that live there from Western Europe,
Right,
and English is about spoken by about 50% of the population.
right.
My daughter-in-law is Ukrainian, so I visited Ukraine and Eastern European too. And so it's an interesting part of the world. I've been to Poland and Ukraine. I haven't been to Romania, but it's an interesting country. Margaret says she's looking forward to go to Ireland in August, maybe Greece and Cuba. Yeah, it's more unfortunate things get canceled, but yeah, Greece may be opening up sooner than the rest of the European Union. They're because they depend so much. Spain and Greece and Italy all depend a lot on tourism for their economies, so they're looking at doing that. Vienna is not an inexpensive city, is it, Hiroko?
But I have a place to stay, you know.
Yeah, yes, it's
Not
expensive.
and I speak the language, so I could find bargains and the stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a pretty country though. Okay, so Israel, yeah, Israel is actually a country that you can live in, and if you don't want to live right on the beach, you can find some pretty moderately priced housing in Israel. So no, November. Margaret, is that the earliest that you can get into Israel, or does that just work up for your schedule? Because I didn't know whether or not they were opening up for tourists.
It's actually a group trip, so that's when they've rescheduled it.
Okay.
Plus,
Okay.
I'm still working and I only get so much vacation time.
Yeah, yeah, I know that. Yes, yes. Okay. Well, hopefully this helped you. What insurance did I use? I actually was pretty happy with Geo Blue, and I just extended that to an expat policy from my multiple trip policy, and that worked for me in Spain, Carmen. But you're going to get an email with a link to all of these insurance carriers that I've researched. You'll get a link to different websites. I do a couple of other live or retire abroad classes occasionally. Most of my classes are technology. So this morning I did one on web browsers, on Windows 10 basics, and one on home office essentials. And so those are typically my classes. But one of the colleges I used to teach at said, "Hey, would you put together a class on living and retiring abroad?" And so I talked to the people that get set up and adapted that too. Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate your comments in chat. You're going to get notes. You can recommend. We really find that people join Get Set Up through a referral, through a friend. I told a friend of mine that was also a community college educator about Get Set Up, and she took 60 classes her first month that she found out about it. Christina Shafton, who is a friend of mine, she was my fitness instructor locally. She teaches a yoga class on Get Set Up, and so we just are trying to build a better community, and we're coming out with tools and new software that'll give people a chance to connect with each other as well. And you can actually form interest groups as well and refer friends. So when you sign up for a class now on the desktop, after you book the class, you'll have the ability to invite somebody right at that time as well. And I don't know whether you know it or not, but guides or members are welcome to put together an interest group. We support you. We've helped with Zoom support. We help with teaching assistants, like Kim has been on our meeting with us and help post a few things, suggestions. You can suggest a new class. If you'd like a recording of the session, just send an email at help@getsetup.io. If you're joining us from live stream on Facebook or YouTube or another channel, go to getsetup.io and you register. The account's free, and you get to participate in the meeting and join us and ask questions right away. So I wanted to thank you all for, this is my late afternoon. So dinner is what I'm going to go off to after this. But I know for some of you it's evening, and some of you are in New York and other places in Ohio and other areas around the country. But did you find some useful things out of this class that you can say, hey, there's some good ideas that I can take, even if you're just going to go on vacation, some of this information is helpful. But living abroad is kind of a good adventure. Thanks, Carmen. Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate everything. And anybody have any questions before we sign off and say good night to each other?
Can you come up next lecture? I'm going to repeat this class, but can you come up with a list of discount airline, discount hotel? Seems to be zillions, but I just need 3 or 4 reliable ones where I can get a little bit of discount on regular price.
For what is that, Hiroko? I have a little bit of a hearing loss.
Discount airlines.
Oh, discount airline.
Travel agency, I guess.
Oh boy. I know.
There's so many.
That's probably a good topic for travel as we start to look at booking things. So if you make comments or anything or provide some feedback, ask, say, hey, you'd like to see some, and I took Ryanair, I've taken other Copa Airlines in Panama. So I've taken some non-US, flagship carriers, and it's a little different, but for shorter flights, it's fine. For a longer flight, I probably still want to stay with some of the major airlines, but that's my preference. Everybody travels a little bit differently. So I know some people that took my age, they took Spirit Air to Ireland, and they just upgraded, and they still found it less expensive, but they just upgraded and found it okay because they got a better seating, and they paid for luggage, and all things are all optional on Spirit. There's just, you get a base price, and then you upgrade everything, whatever you want.
Because I don't consider airline as a kind of gourmet restaurant. So long as they bring me from A to B back to A.
Okay. Carmen says there is a course for flying out there for arranging flights. So I wasn't familiar with that. I'll have to check the agenda. So check with getsetup.I and check the schedule, see if there's a course. Okay. And it might be an upcoming one too, because we're expanding the travel classes as people start to take more of an interest in travel. Thank you, Carmen. Appreciate that. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming today and spending some time with me, and let us know when you start living abroad and where you end up going. Okay.
Crush again.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.